What if I told you that the voice in your head that's keeping you stuck really isn't you? It's an old part of your identity running outdated programs designed to protect you and not to help you grow. The voice isn't your true self. It's a programmed part of your mind stuck in old patterns designed to keep you safe. And because it's running outdated code, it sees change as danger and success as risk. And until you become aware of this inner system and learn to upgrade it, you'll keep feeling stuck no matter what you do. The good news is, once you learn how to shift that voice, everything changes, and you're going to learn exactly how to do that today. So I want you to think about the inner narrator. I want you to think about them as a system that's being currently run, okay? So the inner narrator, okay, is a system. So it starts with your identity, which then drives the narration, okay, the narrator, which then leads to your emotions, which then lead to an action, which then lead to you having a certain outcome. Now, the current narrator that you're running is protecting your current identity. It's a protective mechanism that's shaped by your life experiences, which includes these key areas: your childhood conditioning. Okay, how did you grow up? What type of family? Was it a family where you were well off? Were you middle class? Were you just above poverty, or experiencing heavy doses of poverty and had to be on the government backed assistance, whatever that may be. And this is also the messages and the beliefs that were passed down from your family, from your mom, from your dad, from your siblings, from your cousins, your uncles, from your school, from people that you look up to. All of that is conditioning that you were raised with, right? As a child growing up, you inherited a lot of the beliefs and views from your family, and then also from society, right? Conventional wisdom. And then your repeated failures. All the different times that you tried something and it didn't work, and so then you decided that you're not good at something. I remember myself growing up, I had a lot of trouble with math. And for the longest time, I would always look at myself as not being good at math. And then I think in high school, I had a really good teacher that really just shifted my perspective, that allowed me to have a more positive outlook on math. And that it wasn't that I wasn't good at math, it's just I wasn't getting taught correctly. I didn't have a teacher who would walk me through the situation and the problems from a different lens, which allowed me to not take on the identity of not being good at math, but more of I can figure things out given enough time, right? So more empowering, resourceful type of perspective. And then your past environments. This is from your family. How did you grow up? Did you get constant discipline? Were you let free to go out and do what you wanted to do and just come home whenever you wanted to? There wasn't a lot of restrictions on your life? Or did you have a lot of restrictions where you had to be home at a certain time, you had to be in bed at a certain time, you couldn't have certain friends, and maybe you had friends that were not very good to you and picked on you and bullied you? So all of that, right, that is shaped through society, through your family, all of the past environments. And then these stored emotional patterns. This is super important here, because your emotions and how you're reacting really all comes down to a pattern and a process and a system that keeps running based off of how you had interpreted and have interpreted certain situations and circumstances. And they keep being reinforced as your life progresses. Maybe you're someone who has always taken things very personally, and even where there's an objective fact that's stated, or somebody's just saying something, you can take it in a very negative light, or have been taking it in a very negative light and taking it very personal versus looking at things objectively, right? And when you take things personal, your feelings get hurt, right? You're very reactive, or maybe you're quick to pass judgment and then overreact when something happens, right? So those patterns are consistent, and until you become aware of those patterns, right, they're going to keep running. And this is a really important key point here. You're not hearing your thoughts. You're hearing your identity's predictions. Okay? You're hearing your identity's prediction. So it's all a set prediction and system and process that has been running automatically, and then your internal operating system is predicting how to react, how to move, what behavior to, action to take, all of that, right? It's one big loop and one big system that continually operates whether you realize it or not. And so understanding that your inner voice is actually your identity's prediction system, this helps you realize that it's not the absolute truth, and it's a habit that you can change and update. And by upgrading this operating system, you can shift your narrator to produce empowering predictions leading to different emotions, actions, and ultimately better outcomes. Okay, so now let's go over the 3 voices that keep people stuck. Write this down. 3 voices that keep people stuck. So I'm going to draw a circle here. Okay, really large circle here. And then we have a circle right here. And then we have a circle right here. The first layer here is the fear voice. This is the most basic and instinctual voice, and it's focused on protection and safety. This is the voice that keeps telling you, what if this doesn't work? What if you fail? What if you embarrass yourself? What are others going to think about you if you try and you don't succeed? How is your family going to look at you? How are your friends? How is society? What about the public? The purpose here of the fear voice is to keep you safe and secure, to not venture out and to do anything that is going to cause change or to be different, because the fear voice is trying to protect you from any type of experience that is not going to be safe and secure. And so this is where you constantly are feeling anxious and are avoiding situations as a whole, right? Maybe you want to go and talk to, a particular girl or a particular guy, but you are running all these different scenarios in your mind that, you just don't even go out and do it. Or if you want to start a business and you're running all these different scenarios in your mind about what could be, what could happen, what could potentially, maybe, probably happen. And then you just convince yourself to not even just do anything at all, right? So then you just stop dead in your tracks and you're like, nah, I'm not even going to try. So right here, protection. And then number 2, this is the doubt voice. This voice tries to maintain predictability, what it already knows and what it already understands. And it's often comparing you to others. And some of the common messages and just narration that's going on in your mind here is talking about you're not ready. You need more information. You need more research. You need more predictability. You need to be almost 100%, or if not 100% sure that this is going to work, right? You need to make sure that the stars are aligned perfectly and the sun and the moon are positioned at a certain, position before you make any type of move, because if you don't, then you could potentially fail, and that's no good for anybody. And probably one of the biggest ones here is the thief of comparison, always comparing you to somebody else who's at a different level than you are, right? They're not necessarily better than you, and I don't think anybody's better than another person. It's more of they potentially have more knowledge, more experience, right? More perspectives, more bigger perspectives. But I wouldn't say necessarily better, right? I don't like to use that word in terms of like a better human being. I mean, better in skill, better in perspective, all of that, but not as a better human being is what I'm ultimately trying to get across. And so what this ultimately does here at this stage, it prevents you from stepping into unknown territory where the outcomes are uncertain, right? Where you don't know if something's going to work out 100%. And here's the thing, things are not supposed to work out exactly how you think they are every single time, right? There's so many different ways to get to a destination and to get an outcome, where if you've gone through and you've like created this perfect scenario of like, I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to reach this destination. Well, guess what? That's typically not how it works, right? So you're typically going through and you are taking those actions, but you hit a roadblock, you hit a curve, you hit an obstacle, right? That take you a different direction, but you're still ultimately going back and directing yourself to where your ultimate destination is at, right? But this doesn't allow you to step into that because it's uncertain, it's unknown. And remember, at the end of the day, this is all about maintaining predictability here, right? It wants to make sure that your experiences that you're going through and everything that's happening, it's predictable and it's not out of the ordinary. So the purpose here, maintain predictability. And then we have the identity voice. And this purpose here is to preserve identity. This is the deepest and most powerful voice. It preserves your current identity and resists change. This is the common phrases that are constantly used when you come across a situation that is uncertain or just different. This is not who I am. This is for other people. I don't belong here. I've always been like this. I've always been the person who does A, B, C. I could never do that because I don't have X, Y, and Z. Those types of voices that are happening in your mind that are saying all these different things that are limiting you. Because remember, it's trying to preserve identity. Whatever your current identity is trying to save that, preserve it, and make sure that it keeps running. Because your identity is everything. It's how you see the world. And think of your identity as like outside of you, okay? And it has like its own views and perspectives and all of that. And each time that you level up, you have a new identity. And that new identity now has new views, new perspectives, right? And then when you take on that new identity, now the preservation of that identity is different. You have different views, different perspectives, right? And so then the old identity that you had, that had all these limiting beliefs, all these limited perspectives, that identity is no longer trying to be saved because it's dissolved, right? It's no longer there. This new identity that you're looking to become, right, has a higher perspective, a different view, right? But at this level, what we're trying to do here is really understand the three different voices that keep you stuck currently, right, in your current situation. You have your fear voice, your doubt voice, your identity voice. And the fear voice is trying to protect you, right? Maintain status quo. Doubt voice is, it wants to maintain the predictability of the current operating system that you're running. And you want to preserve your identity. Like, how are you currently acting and taking on in terms of the identity that you have now? What does that look like, right? Those voices are all going to reinforce all three of these different areas. So the voice in your head is simply your old identity trying to survive your new decisions. These three voices here work together to keep you stuck. Fear keeps you safe, doubt keeps you predictable, and identity keeps you consistent. And the real transformation here is recognizing these voices for what they are, which are survival mechanisms that protect outdated parts of yourself. The real breakthrough happens here when you shift your identity layer. These voices no longer control your actions. And here's a simple example. Let's say you want to start a business. The fear voice is saying, what if you go bankrupt? What if you lose all your money and burn all your cash? What are you going to do? What's going to happen? And then the doubt voice says, what if you don't know enough about marketing? What if you don't know enough about sales or even how to run a business as a whole? And then your identity layer here says, I'm not an entrepreneur. People like me are not entrepreneurs. So you need to understand and accept that that voice in your head is not valid and it's not you, okay? That's really, really important here when you're having these types of thoughts come in your mind. Think of this. Think about saying out loud or in your mind, I don't accept that as a valid opinion, or I don't accept that thought as valid. That right there is a very powerful statement that you can say out loud or to yourself so that you can block these different narratives, right? These different voices in your head And you'll realize just how powerful that truly is, because you're stopping them dead in their tracks. Very, very powerful. Okay, so now let's go over why you feel stuck. The identity conflict loop. Why you feel stuck. So you have your old identity, which then has the old narrator, which then leads to old emotions, which leads to old actions, which then leads to old outcomes. And so it's this big loop here, right? Your old identity has your old narrator, which is giving you old emotions, but then you're taking old actions, same old actions, which then is giving you the same old outcomes, and then everything becomes reinforced, right? It's this complete identity loop here. When you try to grow or change, your inner narrator works to protect your old identity that you're trying to move beyond. And here's the interesting thing. The narrator might feel like intuition, like a gut feeling, but more often than not, it's fear in disguise that's aiming to keep you safe by resisting change. And because the narrator is still tied to the old identity, it triggers familiar emotions like anxiety, doubt, or frustration, which lead to habitual actions that maintain the status quo, right? So they maintain the same exact experience over and over again. And these actions produce the same old outcomes, reinforcing your old identity and keeping you stuck in a loop. And here's the thing, you're not stuck right now. You're in identity transition with outdated narration. And this manifests itself in all different types of ways, right? Think about you wanting to live a healthier life and you want to start going to the gym or eating healthier. The inner voice starts to protect your identity. Like, you're not somebody who goes to the gym. You're not somebody who works out. I'm somebody that eats whenever I want and eat whatever I want, right? I don't watch what I eat or count my calories or whatever that may be. And that voice then starts to have you skip your workouts, starts to have you eat, junk food and all different types of foods that are not good for you, because you are listening to that old identity because it wants to keep you safe and secure. And let's say you want to take on a new opportunity. You want to get a new job with higher pay, and your voice in the head is saying, hey, you're not good enough. You don't deserve to make X amount of money. You need to sharpen your skills, or you need to do X, Y, and Z, or you're not the type of person that is able to get this kind of job, right? All those different things that are happening in your mind that the messages are trying to protect your current system, that's really what is going on there, right? And it's really about the awareness and understanding that this is going on in the first place. That's really going to make the biggest difference here. And so we become aware of the inner narration that's going on and the loop that's causing all of this, right? And we become aware of that and we start to change that narration. We start to question it. We start to think about it deeper and observe it and think about, is this really me? Where did this come from? Who's saying this? Is this true? Or why is it saying this, right? You start to question it and you start to have a conversation with it. And I would even say, treat it as like a little child. When you're trying to become a better version of yourself and reach a new identity layer and level, you really want to treat those voices like little children and have them feel heard, understood, acknowledged, right? Like, hey, I'm not this person. Okay, hey, listen. I hear you, I feel you, I understand you, I acknowledge how you're feeling, but guess what? This is actually not who I am, but I understand that this is who you are, and that's okay, but I am something else. I am empowering, I am the positive individual, I'm someone who is capable of making things happen, right? So treat those voices as little children, and you'll realize they just want to be heard. They just want to be acknowledged. They just want to be seen. And that's super important there, right? Because you can start to question these different narrations and voices in your head that have been going on for your entire life. Okay, so now let's go over breaking down the narrator and dissecting the inner voices. Okay, so let's go over the inner voice dissection. There's 3 questions that we want to outline and lay out here so that we can understand and dissect the inner voices, right? Really understand and figure out what's going on here, and let's essentially pull back the layers and get deep into what everything really is here. Okay, so question number 1. Whose voice is this? Often the voice in your head really isn't yours. It's made up from the echoes of your parents, teachers, culture, society, the media, or your past self, right? This is the messages that you have just accepted blindly, right? Conventional wisdom, all these different things that have gone on in your life that you have accepted just as reality, right? Just as objective truth, where in reality, you have to understand that this voice is not yours. It came from somewhere and it's not true. It's just that you have decided it to be true for you at this given moment. Think about your upbringing. If you had a family where you had constant discipline and you needed to be in your room by a certain time, in bed by a certain time, you couldn't really go out and do a whole lot of stuff. So very sheltered. You were reprimanded all the time and your teachers were discouraging, right? All these different things you need to become aware of and reflect upon how you grew up. What are the different things that were happening in my life to get my current view, my perspective? Because that voice is coming from somewhere. It's coming from an event or circumstance, an experience that you had that you have attached a meaning that is negative, that then has affected how you look at particular situations and the world around you. And there's typically a source that you can point to of what happened, what event, what circumstance, what situation led to you believing things to be the way that they are. And then number 2, what is it trying to protect? You got to think about it. The voice typically is always going to have a protective type of perspective and role. It's trying to protect you from perceived threats. Remember, perceived, perception is giving it that these particular events and circumstances are going to be threats, so therefore you should not take this or you should not do this, like embarrassment, failure, or rejection. Now, it's doing that because it believes that you're going to experience those emotions, when in reality, you're likely not going to, right? Like, think about a situation, in terms of an event where, let's say you're speaking to a group of friends, or you say something to a group of people, right? And you're having a conversation, and maybe you stutter or you mispronounce your words or whatever it may be, right? Like, and maybe you feel like a little weird or awkward. Man, whatever, it is what it is. But like, think about it, a week from now, 2 weeks from now, like, people are not going to remember that and be like, oh, remember when so-and-so said X, Y, and Z, and the way that they said it, and then how they enunciated it. Like, nobody's gonna care, right? The more you really think about it, you start to realize that people don't really care at the end of the day. They're too busy worrying about themselves. And so when this voice says, don't try because you're gonna fail, it's trying to protect you from disappointment, from failure, even if that safety limits your growth, right? Because remember, it's trying to keep itself alive, that identity, and it's trying to protect you, right, from experiencing any type of discontent. And so when you understand that this is naturally protective in nature, you're able to soften your resistance to it and open up dialogue and space for change. And then number 3, is this voice accurate or just familiar? Just because a voice is loud and familiar doesn't mean that it's the right voice and that it's true or aligned with who you want to be. You may be wanting to take on a new position or take on a new experience that challenges you, but the voice keeps telling you that you're not good enough. But that doesn't reflect your actual value or your potential. And so just because something is familiar doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that it's aligned. It doesn't mean that it's your identity. Okay, so now let's talk about the 4 escape methods. 4 escape methods. Escape method number 1. Separate self from narrator. The narrator is the voice of your old self. It's the part that holds on to your past fears, beliefs, and patterns. So the narrator is the old self. And the self is your core being. This is your true essence. This is you being free, creative, and capable of growth. The narrator tries to convince the self that you are the voice. But guess what? You're not the voice. The self is much bigger, much larger, right? And this is the key component here. The narrator, this is like its own little box here, right? This is essentially just a protective shell, right? That's how you really want to think about it. It's trying to protect itself from dissolving and becoming a different version, right? Because it wants to make sure that it's safe and secure. And when you realize that you are not the narrator, you create space between your true self and the limiting stories that you've been told. And this whole separation here, when you separate these two out, what this also does is it breaks the illusion of this is who I am, right? You've given space. You are separate, right, from the narrator. This is yourself, and it's completely separate, and there's no attachment, there's no connection here, right? It's a complete separate part, okay? There's no connection there. And then once you do that, you're able to have conversations with the narrator because it's not you, it's separate from you. And so now when negative self-talk arises, instead of accepting it as reality or as truth, you're able to observe it as a passing voice and not your identity, right? You're able to just kind of see thoughts go through your mind and observe them, right? Think of it as you sitting in a movie theater and you're watching a movie and you're reading all these different thoughts that are happening, right, in your mind. It's separate, right? There's the movie on the screen and there's you sitting down. You're not the same. And you're able to read all those messages that are happening, right? All those different voices. And you get to see them just pass by, right? And then you get to observe them and understand that they are not you. And this shift allows you to choose new thoughts and feelings rather than being tied to old narratives. And escape method number 2, rewriting the narrator script. And the goal here is to change how you're talking to yourself. So let me just draw a little line here and put old and then new. I can't turns into I can learn. I'm not ready turns into I'm becoming ready. Notice the change in the shift in language. This isn't me to this is who I'm becoming. Notice how the language shifts from old to empowering language. I can learn. I am becoming ready. This is who I'm becoming. The goal isn't to silence or ignore your inner voice because it's always going to be there as part of your mind's operating system. And it's talking from the lens and perspective of your current identity. And instead, you can upgrade the narrator by rewriting the scripts from limiting fear-based to empowering and growth-oriented ones. This process is called identity recoding, where you're changing the narrative that your mind repeats about who you are and what's possible for you. And by feeding the narrator new scripts that reflect your future self and goals, you shift your internal operating system to support change and progress. So you're changing the scripts from I can't speak in public to I'm learning to speak in public, to I'm not ready to start a business to I'm becoming ready to start a business. I'm learning how to start a business. That old voice that is saying, this is not who I am. It shifts to, this is exactly who I'm becoming. And keep in mind, this method doesn't fight or deny any of these thoughts. It invites transformation by gradually replacing them with new supportive ones. And over time, this rewriting leads to new emotions, actions, and ultimately new realities aligned with your future identity. Escape method number 3, the 5-second rule. This is a quick and simple tool that you can use anytime that you notice that your inner voice is causing doubt, fear, hesitation, because it acts like a mental pause so that you can interrupt automatic limiting thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and bring awareness to the current moment. So when that voice is coming into your head, pause and ask yourself, is this my narrator talking or my future self? This question alone helps you identify whether the voice that you're hearing is from your old, limiting identity or the empowered self that you're becoming. And why this works so well is because it creates a micro-identity shift, a tiny but powerful moment where you step out of old patterns and into your new empowered identity. And these repeated micro shifts build momentum and eventually reprogram your internal operating system. And then escape method number 4, build evidence against the narrator. You see, the narrator, right, the voice, doesn't change naturally through just thinking better thoughts. Yes, that's part of it. The biggest leverage point here is providing it contradicting evidence that disproves the old limiting beliefs and stories, right? You think about situations where you are feeling a certain way about going out there and speaking in public, or about going to a different position, a different job, or doing something that causes a little bit of fear or uncertainty, right? Whatever action that may be. What you can do is you can look back into your life and look at what are other situations and experiences that I've had where I had fear, I had uncertainty, it was scary, it was, unknown, I didn't really know what was going to happen, but I took the leap anyway, right? Think of those situations in the past that you're able to use as ammunition so that when the voice comes into your mind and says, hey, this is scary, this is uncertain, this is a situation where you can get embarrassed, or what if people think of you this or that? Once you start thinking about all the different things that you've done and throughout your life that have shown time and time again that you're actually able to power through a situation that is uncertain, that is a little bit scary, that is a little bit unknown, that is a little bit different, right? Then the voice starts to quiet down because you're feeding it information and evidence disproving what it's telling you. Like, actually, no, I've been through a lot of situations where I had experienced fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and I was actually able to overcome that. And here in the now, what you can also do is take small micro actions on a consistent basis that directly challenges the narrator's perspectives and beliefs and views, right? Their stories. And then each action creates more proof, which gradually reshapes your identity. And with that, it rewrites the narrator into a new supportive voice. And these small actions can be very, very small and minor, right? Let's say you want to become more productive and you want to focus more, right? Well, small little micro actions of 10 to 15 minute time blocks of you dialed in, focused in, and actually focusing on something without zero interruption, right? Those little small minor actions build a lot of momentum and proof that disproves that voice, right? That narrator that's trying to tell you that you're not this or you're not capable of doing ABC, whatever that may be. Because truly, we're a lot more powerful than we give ourselves credit for. And remember that your inner voice is not your enemy. It's just the outdated software version of who you used to be. You don't escape the voice by fighting it. You escape it by upgrading the identity that it's trying to protect.